Hello and welcome to the Diagnosed podcast, the day that turns your life around. A podcast where we talk about a moment diagnosis changes life and everything and what happens next. I'm your host today. My name is Lee Cunningham. But before we begin today's story, I want to start with something a little bit lighthearted. So as we planned to get the Diagnosed podcast out for Valentine's Day, I came across a story just a few days ago where a lady's lying on Valentine's Day and she falls asleep and she has a magnificent dream, a dream that her husband gives her a diamond ring. When she wakes up, she phones her husband and she says, "I've had a dream you give me a diamond ring for Valentine's Day. What do you think that means?" And he said, "Well, you're going to find out tonight." And when he came home, he gave her a box, perfectly wrapped, and she opened it and it was a book all about interpreting dreams. You don't need to laugh, Phil. So anyway, let's get into today's episode. So I should say that Diagnosed is brought to you by UID Meet, the UK's provider, the only provider of medical ID that can alert up to 4 mobile phones in case of emergency. So thank you to UID Meet. Today we're going to talk about diabetes type 1. And before I introduce the guest, I was going to tell you a little bit about my understanding of diabetes type 1, because I should say that none of this is medical kind of information. So I think I will introduce a very dear friend of mine with diabetes type 1, and he is Mr. Phill Connell. Hello, Phil.
Hi, Lee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing your time with me today. Now, the reason I introduced you first is because if I make a mistake now, you can quickly pull me up. Okay. So
yeah. I promise that when I spot a mistake, I'll pull you up straight away. But I also promise that I also retain the right to be wrong.
So my understanding, Phil, of diabetes type 1 is that it's an autoimmune condition where the body has, if you like, wrongfully attacked the part of the pancreas that produces insulin, which is a hormone that is kind of like a key to transporting the blood sugar from the foods and the drinks that we consume into cells right across the body.
That's exactly right, Lee. It's you've covered all the main sort of physiological parts of what type 1 diabetes is. It's autoimmune. Essentially, it takes away a body's capacity to produce insulin, which converts blood sugar into energy. And it's important, I think, to differentiate that slightly from type 2 diabetes, which has many of the same symptoms and many of the same long-term potential problems, but is caused by a different mechanism.
Right.
So there's a lot of similarities and some fundamental differences. The main one being that in type 1 diabetes, your body cannot produce insulin.
At all?
At all.
Right, okay. So that's when people will be familiar with the word insulin.
Yeah.
Even whether they've got someone diabetic who they know in the family or a friend, colleague, etc. Almost everyone's heard of insulin. But it is this hormone that's produced usually by the pancreas to take the sugars to every cell to unlock the energy.
Absolutely. And the key treatment for type 1 diabetes is to inject insulin from outside the body. So that insulin is a prescribed medication in much the same way as paracetamol is for pain. Yeah. Insulin has to be injected by type 1 diabetics.
Right. Okay. So I think I should say that Phil and I have been friends since childhood. I think we were about 9 years old when we met. So we've known each other for getting on for 5 decades.
Wow.
And so Phil, take us back then to, because we had some time, if you like, apart, where you did university.
Yeah.
I was doing my thing. And in that time, I think, before we kind of met back up, in that time, as I understand it, you'd been diagnosed with diabetes type 1. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So the time when you and I went our separate ways was more or less when I turned 18. Yeah. I turned 18, I finished 6th form. I was lucky enough to go away to uni. And during the second year at university, I started to develop the symptoms of what I didn't know was type 1 diabetes. The key thing for me there was that I was living away from home. I was living on site at the university. And I started to experience a lot of tiredness.
Yeah. So these are the symptoms.
These are the symptoms that now I would know what was happening. And in somebody else, I'd say, "Oh, you need this check." But I was away from home, proud, young, full of vigor and vim. Also, I thought. But I started to experience a lot of tiredness. I was going to the loo like nobody's business. One of the symptoms is that your body in some way recognizes there's too much sugar and therefore that you need to get rid of it in the form of urine. So you go to the loo a lot. That means that you've got an insatiable thirst. Yeah. But you also, weirdly, have a craving for very sweet things because somehow your body knows something's wrong and that it needs to be able to convert sugar to energy. So it craves energy. So when you're thirsty, what do? You buy Coca-Cola and you buy Lucozade and you make things worse
so it does
without
make
knowing.
Things work.
Yeah. So the cravings for sweet things are quite overwhelming. I remember going into lectures with a bottle of Lucozade and a Twix and then falling asleep in the lectures because one of the consequences of high blood sugar is it makes you very, very drowsy. And just not knowing what was wrong. I thought I was tired because I was spending too much time in the student union.
I was going to say, what did you think? You knew it was out of character, so it was an unnatural kind of tiredness and mixed up with these other symptoms. But when did you... So what kind of time frame? Because in my kind of research, it suggests that this happens over quite a rapid time frame. So what kind of time frame would that have been over, Phill?
That is it's a tricky question, that one, Lee, because and I have thought about this, especially since we talked about this podcast, and for me, I would say that the timescale between feeling ill and having symptoms and being diagnosed could be measured in months, not a year, but possibly as much as several months. Now, that doesn't mean that it took that long for the symptoms to come on. Yeah. It means it took that long for me to act on those symptoms. Right. So perhaps now's a good time to say what the motivation was. And like so many people who are listening now and so many people thinking about their own lives, it takes an external stimulus to actually make you do something. So I had put up with the symptoms and I was fighting through them because, as you know, Lee, I'm quite a determined little man. Yeah. And I was quite a determined little 19, 20-year-old. And so I just carried on regardless. I went back home to my parents to start my third year, which was a sandwich year. I was doing a sandwich degree. So 2 years at uni, 1 year in work, another year at uni. That year in work was actually done back home in Rochdale at a local business. So I went back to live at my mum's. When I arrived at my mum's, she almost immediately said, "Look, you need to go to the doctors. Something's not right." I'd lost a huge amount of weight. Yeah. I'd never had weighing scales at uni.
That's another symptom then, the weight loss.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as a slight aside, what causes the extreme weight loss is a phenomenon called ketoacidosis. And when you've got very high blood sugars, you develop ketones in your blood. And ketones they're essentially a type of acid. And what it does is it strips down your muscles in order to somehow provide emergency energy for your body. Right. So I was basically keeping myself alive by my body eating at itself. Yeah. I don't know if keeping myself alive is a good way to describe that. It's certainly not a positive experience. So my fighting weight at the time was 11.5 stone. I was 7.5 stone. Right. Wow. When I went back to my mum's. Yeah. So I didn't look great. No. But in my mind, I just felt, well, I look like a scruffy student. But my family recognised that something wasn't right. So I did as I was told by my mum, as so many of us do, quite rightly. And I went to the doctors. And I think the practice nurse there pretty much knew straight away, but said, asked me some questions about lifestyle and what I was doing and other things, and said, we think you might have diabetes. They did a urine test at that time.
Yeah, I was going to say about the urine test, because is it that back then, is it like little, were they called cystics or something like that? They dip them in, and is it
Yeah.
measuring for sugar in
There'd be a little
glue?
tub of test strips,
Yeah,
and you can dip them in your urine,
yeah,
and that will. I think there's 2 different types, or I don't know whether it was a combined strip. I honestly couldn't tell you, because I didn't continue to use those going forwards. And we'll come to what that was replaced with. But at the initial stage in the doctors was they dipped a test strip in, and it gives a colour, changes colour, a little bit like a litmus test, changes colour for acid and alkali. This is the same kind of detection.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the colour on the back of the tub that the test strips came in, and it said that I had a lot of sugar in my blood. So they said, right, okay, we think that you've got... In my urine, sorry. Apologies. Yeah, sugar in my urine. And so I was sent home, and I was asked to fast and come back in the morning, where they'd take a fasting blood sugar using a finger prick device to test how much sugar was actually in my blood.
Right.
So this was the first finger prick that I remember having. And on this following day, they had gathered a bunch of information together, and we did the finger prick thing. And I remember that my fasting blood sugar was 22 point something millimoles per litre.
Yeah.
And that's having had no food that day.
Yeah.
For reference, if you don't have any kind of diabetes, your blood sugar is probably anywhere between 5 and 7. And mine was more than 3 times that.
Yeah.
More than 3 to 4 times that.
So is that pretty categorical for them to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Immediately then, they referred me to the next stage, which was an appointment with the diabetes special qualified nurse, who was leading diabetes care for Rochdale, my hometown, at that time. And that was not at the GPs, quite rightly the GPs there to signpost things. That was in the centre of town, in one of the health centres there where the diabetes team were located. So I went in short order. I think following day again.
I was going to say that it's really this apart from the symptoms that you experienced, that you was a little bit resilient to doing anything about yourself. The actual this part now leading up to diagnosis and discovering what the problem was pretty quick, wasn't it?
It was very quick from a process point of view. The health service, the NHS, swung into action really quickly, which is great. I mean, numbers of reasons to be grateful to the NHS, for myself and for other people close to me and other people who I hardly know. But this is another example of the great British NHS swinging into action. And I think, that talks a lot about the process. What's important to me at this stage is the feeling that came with that. I had pushed it to the back of my mind, but acknowledging, especially after going back to my parents, and people being a bit alarmed about how I looked and how I was, how tired I was, is the feeling of being told, okay, you've got diabetes. At this stage, they didn't say type 1, but you've got diabetes and we're going to refer you to the team.
What was your understanding at that point, if you can kind of cast your mind back, of the, whether it was, were you familiar with diabetes prior to that? Was you, did you understand, or did you have any preconception of the severity of it, regardless of whether it was diabetes type 1 or?
To be fairly, at that time, remember this is 1990.
Yeah.
we didn't have the internet in the way that we have it now.
Yeah.
For most people, it was before the internet. I think it existed, but it certainly wasn't what it is now. So I knew very little. There was no family history that I was aware of. I later found out that some older relatives had developed type 2 diabetes, but there was no history that I knew of type 1 diabetes in the family. And so
I'd read recently that one of the myths around diabetes type 1 is that it's a young person's condition. Where is that your understanding that that's a myth? That actually it can come on at any age, but it's predominantly like a youthful thing.
I think that's reasonably true, Lee. It can come on at any time. Sometimes the symptoms of type 1 can be caused by if you get an illness that becomes pancreatitis. So if another illness damages your pancreas, then that can cause the symptoms of type 1 diabetes. Right. But going back to your question, I think type 1 diabetes, it tends to develop at a much younger age. Right. And I think where that's especially true is compared to type 2 diabetes.
Which is the other end of the...
Which is the other diabetes. I think the word diabetes does relate to sugar in the blood. So they are both diabetes, and they're both valid, but quite different. And type 2 tends to come on later in life than type 1 because it tends to be caused by parts of the body beginning to sort of wear out.
Right. So resisting the insulin.
Insulin resistance and... it's a little bit like heart disease in the sense that, it can come on at any time, but it's more likely to come on later in life, and it's more likely to come on if your body's under stress. So one of the key causal factors is being overweight, not necessarily obesity, but the more weight you carry, the more hard work your body's doing to keep going, and that includes digesting your food, as well as pumping your blood around your body and all the rest of the things that come with carrying extra weight. There are other things like what race you come from. Sadly,
people being more predisposed to it.
I think people from South Indian backgrounds are more prone to type 2 diabetes, just because of genetics and the way that the bodies are made up. But it's certainly not restricted to any particular age, sex, race, background.
So you've had this period of time, you come home from university, your mum steps in and says this isn't right, gets you down to the local GP who refers you on to the diabetes clinic. So you couldn't have been non-compos mentis about things. How did you actually feel when they actually turned around and said it's diabetes for sure, when they did the test with the little dipstick, and then when they then confirmed that it was diabetes type 1, how did that make you feel?
That it's a really interesting question, because it's the first time we've talked about the emotion associated with it, and to be fair, my initial sense being told what I had was one of enormous relief, because although I'd pushed it to the back of my mind, the alternatives weren't great that I was thinking about. Right. You've lost a lot of weight.
Yeah.
Excuse me. You've lost a lot of weight. You don't look well. Hair's straggly, limbs are straggly, clothes don't fit, tired, painful as well, because I was having a lot of pain in my kidneys, because they're under enormous strain when you...
Blood sugar level of 22 when you've been fasting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not going to say chronic pain, but discomfort, a lot of discomfort that I'd got used to. So a massive sense of relief, enormous sense of relief when they said, right, okay, this is treatable. And the treatment is reasonably simple, and you're going to start feeling better straight away.
Wow.
And on that day, so we're talking day 3 now, down with the diabetes special nurse, she was like, right, okay, what we need to do is get you started on insulin. And I was like, right, okay, in my mind, okay, so what's the plan? And she pulled out the kit And there I was looking at a vial of insulin and a syringe.
So it was maybe not glass syringes, but plastic syringe that you had to use back then. Things have changed, which we'll come on to, but wow.
And so it feels like in the space of 5 minutes of being told what it was and that it was treatable, and then being presented with some of the paraphernalia, the syringe and the vial of insulin, and thinking, wow, this is much better, because, you know, conditions that other people have had to deal with, things like cancer were what were going through my head, and I thought, well, it's not that.
Yeah.
So,
and I suppose if somebody turned around, someone in a trustworthy position like a medical person, diabetes clinic, turns around and says, "This is treatable." Yeah. I can imagine that being a weight lifted off your shoulders.
It was a massive, massive relief. Yeah, absolutely. It was huge. Of course, you still have questions, but the overwhelming feeling was, it was a massive relief, because I knew in my heart of hearts clearly something was wrong, and now I knew what it was. So the next part of the process is, fantastic, that's great news. Now what do we do about it? Yeah. And that is, we're talking of the story and the day that changed my life. I'd say that is the day. Yeah. The day is when it was confirmed to me what it was, and that it could be treated. And if this was a book, that's the end of chapter 1. That's the day when you turn the page and the rest of your life starts.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
you move from getting worse to getting better.
Yeah, because I think most people can relate in whether the diabetes or not. Anyone can, we all have certain things that happen to us over time, and you worry about things before you do anything. So I can imagine that moment being a complete relief.
Yeah, definitely.
Was there any when that relief came and when you learned more, did you know anything about diabetes type 1 personally before
that? No.
Right.
And the only reason I hesitate then was that, the beginnings of chapter 2 are, okay, now find everything out that you can find out in as short a time as possible.
Total immersion.
Oh, yeah.
Right, because I know Phill, obviously. Yeah, intelligent chap. And I can imagine you absolutely diving in and finding out was there any point where you was overwhelmed with because, you've had 4 decades. No, not quite 4 decades. We're getting on for 4 decades where it's a full-time job. Yeah. It was a relief perhaps, but I can't kind of imagine what it's like to always be thinking about, your blood sugar levels, diet, exercise, social, just the way it affects everything. So this is like a new layer that's on top of Phill that he has to keep in mind all the time. So I'm just wondering if after that relief, the initial relief, whether you kind of looked at all that information when you began to immerse yourself in it and think, this is a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot.
And all the implications of that, like maybe socially, like you said, you're a young man by this time.
Yeah.
Like you say, down Students' Union, gigs, all them things that I know you love to do. It must have played its part in determining, what was your attitude? Did you I'm just going to get on with this and deal with it, and this is what I got to do? Or was there any kind of disappointment about the amount that you have to do as someone living with diabetes type 1?
Lee, I think that the context of being told that I have a treatable condition, it's not a disease. There are progressive effects, often, sometimes. But being told that I had something that was a long-term treatable condition that would never go away, it was such a relief that once you accept that there is no cure, and that's important.
I was going to ask you about whether any medics at the time kind of suggested that, within 5-10 years that we're expecting there to be a cure?
No, and I think that really helped me
Right.
because I think with a lot of chronic diseases, we're right to ask the question, is there any hope of a cure? And people told me, and everybody was consistent, and the science backs it up. Well, yes, there's hope of a cure. However, the cure is more likely going to be related to, in the future, preventing people from developing it. And it's like, you've got it. You need to deal with the reality of what it is and not with the hope of a cure. Of course, I did what you would expect me to do. I joined the British Diabetic Association, as it was called then. In Diabetes UK, it's called now.
Yeah.
And
good.
And I devoured as much information as I possibly could, and everything there. There's a lot of science around finding cures and finding better treatments, and things have got a lot better in the last 35 years.
Yeah.
But overwhelmingly, the fact that it was treatable, that was enough for me to work on. And going back to your question, Lee, about how does it feel having that extra layer of complication, I think that with anyone who's diagnosed with a chronic condition like this, or like any other that you can treat, is about how you accept that information and how you deal with it. I'm not going to say it's all about attitude, because that sounds a bit glib. But my attitude towards this has always been, what can I do with it and how can I live my life with it? Yeah, there's an extra layer of complication, but the great news is that if you want to live a long and healthy life, your body's a complicated little bag of chemical reactions anyway. So what diabetes has taught me, among other things, is how my body works, because I've become my body's biggest student.
Right.
I can't make it function without knowledge and without the right fuels and the right drugs going into it. I have heard people say, oh, my doctors can't get my blood sugars under control. And I'm not sorry to say I take issue with that, because getting your blood sugars under control is your job. The doctor's job is to supply you with the tools to do that. And that's where the distinction lies. So what diabetes has taught me is to become a student of how my own body works. And 35 years later, I'm here with no significant side effects of having had diabetes for
fantastic, yeah,
well over half my life. So,
and you're a very active person as well.
I'm certainly not fitness freak. What a horrible couple of words. I'm not a fitness enthusiast. I'm a health enthusiast. I'm a little fella. I've never been strong. I was never good at PE at school. I'll never be an athlete, but I look around my peers and I look around some of the guys and I say guys, guys and girls, but I say guys because my peer group is men at 56.
Yeah.
And because I'm a man at 56. And I look around the people I went to school with and I think, well, I'm in better shape than at least half of them. I'm not going to run a marathon. I don't like running. However, a couple of years ago, I managed to ride my bike from coast to coast, and I've had one or two.
That west to east.
It was. I went from Morecambe to Bridlington.
Fantastic.
The Way of the Roses, it's called. You go through the two rose towns. So you go through Lancaster at the one end and then York, and then go to the East Yorkshire coast.
I should add that Phill is a very keen mountain biker, aren't you?
Yeah, I love my mountain bikes more than anything. I used to race BMXs when Lee and I were little, at sort of middle school age, when middle schools were a thing. And so I've never grown out of playing out on bikes. The coast to coast was done on a more roady type bike, but mountain biking's where I have some of my fun. I enjoy it. So active and healthy rather than athletic is how I try and describe myself. And that's all part of, what if I hadn't been diagnosed with diabetes, would I be like this? Maybe not.
Well, we'll never know.
Maybe I would never have put that effort into learning what makes my body tick and how to give it the best chance of getting old, because I'm planning on getting old.
Good.
And becoming a problem for somebody.
So, Phill, If somebody that was recently diagnosed with diabetes type 1, it might be a tough on this, but given the length of the number of years that you've gone now living with this condition, a lot's changed. You must have seen a lot of change.
Yeah.
Not least the GPs being more, back then, maybe strict, whereas now we live in a society where it's patients are experts because of Google, because of AI.
Yeah.
We spoke earlier about this, and you raised a really good point about misinformation as well.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Given that as a backdrop, what would you suggest if someone's recently, say the last couple of weeks, couple of months, been diagnosed with diabetes type 1?
It's a really good question because it raises a really good point. And what I would advise anyone who's recently been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes or any lifelong condition is just be very careful where the information that you read and that you watch and that you digest comes from. There is a huge amount of very good, valuable, useful information. There's a huge amount of really good science and research done into type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and umpteen other conditions. There is also a sometimes overwhelming amount of misinformation. For some reason, there is a massive amount of unregulated, unchecked, unwise, and incorrect information about I talk about diabetes because that's where I am. I still get things appearing in my various social feeds. I'm active on social media.
Yeah.
I get a lot of pleasure from it, both putting into and reading out of the various media. There's a massive amount of misinformation. People will claim that they can reverse your diabetes. People will claim that they can cure it or that you can find a cure.
Are we talking specifically there about the type 1 diabetes? Because I've read about type 2, and we're not really discussing that here, but that certain lifestyle changes with type 2 can be very beneficial, but those same lifestyle changes with type 1 are not going to make a difference.
I think that exacerbates the issue in some ways, because with type 2 diabetes, there are a number of strategies which can help to manage it, and in some cases, not reverse it, I don't think anyway, but manage it through diet and lifestyle to the extent that you don't need the medical intervention in order to manage it.
Right.
For my mind, that doesn't mean it's gone away, but it means that you're managing it very well by the way that you're using and fueling your body. That's where there's a huge grey area, because type 1 diabetics, especially recent ones, can see some of this information and think, oh, I can reverse it.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, no, you can't.
Yeah.
Once your body stops producing insulin, it stops producing insulin.
Yeah.
And the only way to get energy from carbohydrates into your body is to use insulin.
Right.
There are other sources of calories, but I challenge anyone in the Western world to get through a day without carbohydrates.
Yeah.
You cannot live on protein alone.
No.
And even protein raises your blood sugar. So don't ask me about the physiology. I am not a doctor. However, type 1 diabetics have to use insulin in order to treat their condition. There have been, I think this is important to say, although it's a terrible story, and I'm not going to mention any names, but in the news reasonably recently, sadly, somebody had been told that a combination of prayer and practices could cure their diabetes. That person sadly died, and somebody's being charged with at the very least contributing towards that person's death. It's not curable by turning away from medicine. No.
So basically, you listen to your professional medics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to check your sources.
Yeah.
Trust the physicists, the scientists,
Yeah.
the I didn't mean to say physicists. We'll edit that bit out. Trust the clinicians. Trust the doctors. Trust the scientists. They apply a huge amount of rigor to helping you to live a longer, healthier life.
Yeah.
Trust them because they know what they're doing. And yeah, we live in an age where we know more about our own bodies and our own conditions than probably our GP does. But on the other hand, we don't know as much about exactly how it works as the true experts in the research labs do.
Yeah.
They're the people who are making this condition easier to manage and better than it used to be.
I think be careful who you listen to, especially if they're advising you on something that's, such a critical issue. And if it is so, then it's got to be a professional.
Well, let me give you let me tell you a story, a true story about why doctors are so important. So diabetes, 100 years ago, might be 101 now, but let's say 100 years ago, a Canadian doctor, Dr. Banting, brought out some subjects into a surgical theatre in front of some students and other doctors. And he injected those people with the first clinically correct extraction of insulin. And those people were going to die. Diabetes type 1, before this happened, you died. You were put on a starvation diet and eventually you died. But he brought these children out. He injected them with insulin. And one by one, these children woke up and their life was made longer and healthier and happier with the introduction of insulin. It was only 100 years ago. So all of us type 1 diabetics roaming the earth now, 100 years ago, we'd have all been dead by now.
Yeah.
101, 102 years ago, before Dr. Banting did his work. He was a scientist. He was a doctor. Yeah. This was not done through, even that long ago, this was not done through hope and prayer and good luck and a change in lifestyle. These kids were already on a starvation diet because they knew that actual food made them worse.
Yeah.
And insulin it's the biggest single step towards curing the symptoms, not the disease. So listen to doctors. They know what they're doing. No one else does.
Well, exactly. Phil, as we kind of just begin to wrap it up, what would be your number one giveaway to someone in terms of information who's maybe recently been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes?
I would say try to be relieved. It's hard to be told how to feel. Try to see that you've been given a future which possibly you might not have had. The disease is eminently treatable. The treatments are excellent. The prognosis, my experience, is that it's excellent. I'm well over 35 years into my journey with diabetes, and it's taught me a huge amount about myself. And from a purely medical point of view, I'm healthy. I'm not experiencing any of the long-term effects of poor blood sugar control. I've still got all the feeling in my fingers and toes. My eyes still work. My kidneys still work. Yeah, I can still ride a bike from Morecambe to Bridlington with a fair amount of training. And it's way better than what the alternatives in your mind might have been when you started to feel ill.
That's brilliant. Phil, there's so much more that I would have loved to squeeze in today, because I think that the whole kind of topic and some of the questions and the myths that we could have gone into, and there's so much more. So as a final question, do you have a particular site? Like the NHS is my go-to because I kind of trust the information that's on there. It's regularly updated. You can always see there at the bottom of the page. Is that a good place for someone to start? Obviously, their own physician as well.
I think your own physician, your GP initially, and then the people that they refer you to, they will be and should be your source of authority about your condition. Secondly, the NHS website is a fantastic place. Please go there first.
Yeah.
Before you consult Dr. Google, because Dr. Google will send you down some terrifying and quite possibly incorrect rabbit holes. And thirdly, certainly in the UK, and I know that the US and other countries have equivalents, but Diabetes UK is an authoritative source on where things are up to. But so those three places would be the places to start. But go to your GP. Make sure, I know it can be challenging to get enough time with your GP, but do that. Make sure that you get offered the most up-to-date treatments, because treatments come on massively even in the last 5 years, let alone the last 35 years since I started with plastic syringes and vials and getting funny looks in places.
The vials, I mean, when you spoke about that earlier, I had wondered, we see pens now, digital pens, where you can set the amount of insulin that you can measure that for the amount of carbs.
Yeah.
Show that to the camera, actually.
So,
it's going to show you one there.
For the camera, this is what's called a Nova Pen 6. The name relates to who makes it. And you probably can't see very well there, but it lets you dial up the numbers, and it's a simple, look at where the number is up to, and then it'll inject that much insulin. And essentially that's the syringe. That little plastic cap comes off and exposes the needle. You stick it into a bit of subcutaneous fat in your belly or in your leg or in your bum. And off you go. There's the piston there. So it's just a syringe, but it looks like a pen.
Yeah.
I don't get as many funny looks as I used to using that. It's a lot better than using a syringe. Yeah. I was never apologetic about getting the syringe out, doing this in the pub, because at the end of the day, I've got to do it. But people are,
they feel a bit uncomfortable.
Bit of side eye.
Yeah.
So if you're shy about things like that, then this is a lot better. Having said that, if you're diagnosed today or tomorrow or last week, there's a very good chance you'll get offered a pump, which simply sticks to you.
Yeah.
And you can control the pump, really, without anyone else seeing. The only reason I don't use one of those is because I've got used to injecting, and if it's not broken, then don't fix it, from my point of view. I do use a stick-on sensor.
Is that what I've seen on the back of people's arms? I know that a lot of people have, when I've had conversations with people on the database for UID Me, oftentimes a lot of people watch Strictly Come Dancing, and they've seen Nikita, and obviously a professional dancer. And he's been he's been very kind of forthcoming in explaining that he's got
his advocacy of
it's brilliant.
And do you know what I love about? There's a number of things I love about the sensors. They're a game changer in terms of diabetic control, because every 5 minutes it updates to my phone and tells me exactly where my blood sugars are.
That's just something that I'd love. Perhaps can come back again in the future and talk more about things like that. 'Cause that's really
what I will do for the purposes of this episode is I'll send you a couple of photographs of my sensor.
Brilliant.
I'm not going to start pulling my shirt off now. But,
no, please don't.
But there it is. There's a little 10p shaped
I can see it.
thing on the back of my arm. That, by Bluetooth,
Yeah.
Lets me just look at my phone and see what my blood sugar is.
And that's there all the time, is it?
It's there all the time. They last a fortnight at a time, and they are now available on prescription.
Brilliant.
On the NHS in the UK, which is fantastic. This wasn't the case up until a year or two ago.
Yeah.
I used to buy them and resent the expense.
Yeah.
But still be grateful for the information, because knowledge is power. Information and data. That's what allows me to manage that aspect of my body.
Yeah.
And so, the treatments are fantastic.
Brilliant.
And I went through, I don't know, a number of years injecting before I got the pens. And you know what? It kind of worked just as well. Did the job, gets the insulin into your body. But that's just one example of how technology has made managing this condition easier, because faster access to information.
To the information
means you can look after yourself.
Just much more convenient.
Yeah.
Phill, thank you so much for sharing your story. Really means, I mean, I think it means a lot to me on two levels. One, it's a great story when you've got someone with 30 odd years experience of something. You don't get much richer information than that. So thank you for that. But on another level, thank you for being so forgiving for me, being the kind of debut podcast for this particular series. So I really, really appreciate you coming up and spending time. Obviously, aim to get things better, including the bin.
For those people at home who can't see this, Lee's camera to face there is actually sat on an upside down bin. I've used the pro equipment. Mine's on a tripod. Yeah. Lee's is on a bin. It's the height of technology.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it, Phill. I'm sure anyone listening to that, hopefully will get some very, very rich information, and their journey might just be made that little bit easier. And that's the whole point of this. So I should say, Diagnosed has been brought to you by UID Me. 20,000 people now. Phill, just one last question.
Go on.
Do you carry emergency medical ID? I hope so.
Lee, of course I do. We mentioned that I ride mountain bikes and bikes, and so I'd go out on my own,
right?
And sometimes in the dark, and so if I was to have a spill on the bike, I think it's important that a first responder knows that I've got diabetes so that they can check that that's okay. There is a chance that if I've not done my job correctly, that I might be either very high or even worse, very low blood sugar when somebody gets to me. And if I'm very low, there's a chance I might really not be able to speak for myself.
Right.
Or I might have fallen off and knocked my head. So what I do, which is easy to see, is I have my UID Me barcode on the wristband there.
Yeah.
I also have one stuck to my bike.
Yeah.
And depending which shoes I've got on, I have one on my shoes as well that I'm riding with. So it's pretty easy if anyone's checking me. If they go to check my pulse, they'll go, hang on, what's this? And it says here, diabetes type 1, scan QR code, or see reverse, so they can slip that sleeve off my watch strap and see some detail there. So absolutely, I think medical ID, it gives me peace of mind, and it gives my wife peace of mind that when I'm out on my own, I'll be looked after, and she's nominated on there as my contact.
We had our 401th piece of feedback on Google reviews just over the weekend. So we're recording this on a Monday, and peace of mind, Google cleverly kind of takes out phrases, and the most common phrases it puts as links at the top, but it's often mentioned, the peace of mind.
Definitely.
So and again, when you say you have it around, you choose to have it around your wrist. Of course, people carry medical ID in the wallets, they carry it around the neck and the wrist and stuff. But we spoke to Lancashire Ambulance Service some years ago now, and they said the paramedics routinely check people's wrists and neck for a pulse. After that, they might leave it to A&E to look for ID. It depends on how critical the actual emergency is, but I think the wrist is a great place.
I think the earlier the better.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I've never, not since I was a teenager, I've never really worn pendants. They just don't sit nicely with me. So this,
I got mine on.
This thing here is perfect because it just slips onto my. It might be a chunky watch, but it's a bog standard watch strap, and it means that the minute somebody picks up my arm, they'll clock that, because people clock this all the time. You know, I'll just be out or I'll be in business meetings and what's that, Phill? So it's noticeable, and therefore it's doing its job. There's no use having, a medical ID tucked into your sock or your underpants.
Definitely not.
Someone's going to find it there.
So I will just say a big thank you to you who was listening. Thank you again to Phill. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's always a pleasure to spend time with Phill. You should try it. Thanks again, Phill.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks very much for inviting me.